let's talk about array-based algorithms. Most algorithms that deal with arrays are really not as much about arrays as they are about loops. This is because most of the time, you'll need a loop to iterate through the data inside of an array. I'm going to make a strong recommendation that anytime you need a loop to solve an algorithm inside Algorithm Ladder, you utilize a while loop. Yes, there are other kinds of loops available in most programming languages, and some of them do offer handy conveniences, but they also come with certain constraints that can make it much trickier than it needs to be to solve an algorithmic problem. If you're not used to the while loop, this is the time to get used to it. While loops offer incredible flexibility and will make your algorithm solving process much easier. Trust me on this. Let's go ahead and implement the following algorithm. We are to write a function that accepts an array of numbers, and we will return the sum of all those numbers. This pattern, by the way, is known as the reduce pattern. Reducing an array means taking all the data from an array and using it to create one new single value. So getting the sum of all numbers, or the average of all numbers, or the product of all numbers are all examples of the reduce pattern. So the first thing we should do is specify example inputs and outputs. So let's say we're going to create a function called calculateSum. So if we pass in the array 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, our expected output should be 15, since that is the sum of 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5. So let's go ahead and actually create this function. I'm going to do this in Ruby. So we've created a calculateSum function that accepts an array. The thing that we're going to return at the end of this function is a sum variable. We're going to create that sum variable up at the top, and I'm going to start sum out as 0. Of course, if we run this function as is, this function will return 0 no matter what. So now our task is to write the code that goes in the middle. So let's create a while loop. Now to make this while loop work, we're going to need an index variable. So I'm going to start out index at 0, and we say while index is less than array.length. So we're going to run this loop for as many times as there are values inside this array. In this example, we have 5 values, so this loop is going to run 5 times. Again, that's because arrays start at index 0. So since array.length is 5, we're going to run this loop while index is 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that is a total of 5 times, again, because index starts out at 0. We are going to add to the sum variable each item in the array. So in the first round of the loop, while index is 0, we're going to add to the sum array index. Again, at this point, index is 0. So array 0 is going to be the first item in our array. In our example array, that's 1. So we're going to add the number 1 to the sum. Now, if we just leave this loop as is, it's going to be an infinite loop, since index is always going to be 0. So we also need to increment index by 1. This way, after the loop runs the first time, index is now going to be 1. Then the loop is going to run again with index being 1, and this time we're going to add array index, which is array 1. In our example, that's the number 2. We're going to add that to the sum. Now let's just see if our algorithm actually works as intended. So we're going to print the result of this example to the terminal. Going to say Ruby calculate sum, and indeed we get 15. Now this is pretty straightforward. One of the unintuitive tricks that I used here is to set a sum variable to 0 before the loop even begins. Again, as humans, we picture adding 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 starting with the 1. Here, I actually created a variable called sum set to 0, and then we add all the numbers to that sum. Now, we could do a slight alternative here, which is that instead of having a sum variable start out at 0, we could start the sum variable as being whatever the first item inside our array is. So we could say sum is array 0. So in our example, that's going to be the number 1, and we simply start our index out at item 1. So the loop is actually going to begin with index 1. So sum starts out as array 0, that's the number 1. Then index starts out at 1, that's the second item in our array. Again, here you can see the flexibility of while loops. We don't have to start at the beginning of our array. In this example, the while loop starts with the second item, with index 1. So we add the 2 to the 1, and then we add the 3 and the 4 and the 5, and we get our sum. Let's just confirm that this still works, and it does. So this is a simple implementation of the reduce pattern.